More.
9 people survived a fiery plane crash in Toronto, and it appears now the crash was caused by bad weather. Lots of people are calling this a miracle. Look at the aftermath. That's not, yeah, it's not something where you say, here are all the survivors, but miraculously, all 309 people on board walked away from the burned and charred wreckage of Flight 358. The Air France jet was landing at an airport in Toronto when it skidded off the runway and into a wooded area.
I think it just speaks very well for the air crew and the cabin crew for the job they did handling whatever the situation was that they encountered. I think it's that's what all the safety procedures are there for. To actually see them come together and work that well is very, very reassuring.
Investigators are conducting interviews and hoping to find clues from the jet's black boxes, but it looks like bad weather did indeed cause that crash.
Once again, what a great, great miracle that is. All right, all right, good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot for joining us today. I'm Dan Plant.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan London. We are so glad to have you here, and we're so glad to welcome our newest panda.
It has happened.
Our newest addition to our San Diego.
What a miracle this morning. 309 people and the crew on board a Air France flight are alive. And it's amazing.
It is absolutely a miracle. Yesterday, the jet they were on skidded off the runway and then burst into flames. Corinne Winter has the latest from Toronto.
At this hour, investigators here in Toronto will update the media, give us the latest details on this Air France crash. Not a fatal one, but indeed a frightening experience for those on board.
The crash landing of Air France Flight 358 covered the sky with a mass of smoke. Flames shot out from the Airbus A340. Airline officials say the jumbo jet was on a flight from Paris when it overshot the runway on landing at Toronto's Pearson International Airport during severe thunderstorms and skidded into a wooded ravine.
We feel bump, 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 bump. Then the fires come beside me. The window, we see the fire, and the wings is gone. The tire is gone.
Incredibly, all 309 people on board survived the fiery crash, according to Canadian and airline authorities. Some passengers say they used the plane's emergency exit chutes to jump to safety.
This is a very unique situation for us and a good situation in that we'll be able to interview the entire crew, several of the passengers, as well as retrieve the technical data from the plane.
Aviation officials are not yet saying if the crash was the result of the severe weather or something else.
We're going to be looking at different aspects related to the weather, whether that would have contributed to crew fatigue, what was the visibility from the cockpit onto the runway, what were the conditions of the runway at the time that the landing was attempted.
And you're seeing live pictures now of Pearson International Airport, the scene of that wreckage. We were amazed. We checked this morning, and if you can believe it, there was smoke actually smoldering still from that side. So it just gives you an idea of the magnitude of that impact. Now, we've been hearing it all morning from not only survivors, but also rescue officials out here who, again, they say they really credit the work of that flight crew. That's the latest live in Toronto. Corinne Winter, now back to you.
Corinne, thank you so much for that live report, and we're going to move along now and talk a little bit more about this with Richard Martindale, who is a... Go ahead.
He's a former plane crash investigator and has a lot of experience in the field. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. And let's talk about, are you surprised that everybody was able to get out all right? Because honestly, when we first heard that the plane had burst into flames, but that no one was seriously hurt, everyone was shocked.
The crew has a very strict time restraint that they're trained to get people out of an airplane in an emergency. So the fact that everything worked well is great. It shouldn't be surprising, but it is gratifying.
Well, I would say that most of the time when we talk about a plane crash, the report isn't that everybody survived. So to us, this is an amazing thing. You've been on a lot of these. Have you seen a lot of people survive plane crashes?
No, I mean, it's unusual, and it looks like most of the trouble occurred for this airplane after it was on the ground, and then they had some kind of problem. So they were down, they were slowing down, and then they went through, and airplanes are designed to be crash survivable.
You're an accident investigator yourself.
Yes.
Tell us what happens from here as far as the investigation goes.
They're going to get a whole bunch of people together that are going to look at very specialized areas. They're going to have an operator group. They're going to have an airframe group. They're going to have an engine group. They're going to have a weather group. They're going to have an air traffic control group. They're all going to investigate their various areas, and they're all going to get together and try to figure out what exactly happened to make this come about.
So far, it looks like weather, though, huh?
Well, weather's a big factor, but you can't rule out other possibilities because of some of the things that you've already seen.
Nothing about this Air France plane that was any different than our Delta or any plane that we have in this country.
American carriers fly Airbus aircraft, so it's not. No, there's nothing unusual about it at all.
So we should actually take a lot of solace knowing that these situations can be handled and that people can get out okay.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much,
You
Rich.
bet.
We appreciate your time this morning.
Glad to be with you.
All right. Good. Very good. Really does make you feel better, doesn't it?
Certainly an encouraging outcome. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, other big news today.
More than 300 passengers aboard yesterday's Air France flight that crashed while landing in Toronto are expected to be okay. And while it's hard to imagine many positives resulting from a crash, there are lessons to be learned. 10 News reporter Fred Blankenship joins us now from, all right, near Lindbergh Field with more for us. Fred?
So, Carol, you're right. The great news is that those passengers are okay. And you have to excuse us, a plane is going overhead right now and going for a landing. Now, investigators are going to wonder from this, was it a problem with the plane upon landing? Was it a problem with the weather? Putting these pieces together could have a huge impact the next time you fly.
I kind of was nervous, though, I'd be really honest, especially when you get on.
There's no doubt that the last thing passengers at Lindbergh Field want to think about is a plane crash. But after yesterday's crash landing in Toronto, for some, flying on a jumbo jet takes a jumbo leap of faith.
Just get on and go
And pray and get off. I'm glad I'm off.
The reality is that most passengers don't really care about how a plane operates and lands, as long as it operates and lands. But one expert says it's a process we should all be aware of.
The most important thing is when you do an aircraft investigation is that you can't come in with any preconceived ideas.
Rich Martindale is an aircraft accident investigator, one of the guys who searches for clues around the wreckage of downed planes.
But most importantly, we're going to have a weather group on the one that happened in Canada yesterday.
In an interesting coincidence, this week at the San Diego Aerospace Museum, Martindale just happens to be teaching a class to middle schoolers on crash scene investigations.
I was just wondering if all the people were okay and thinking about what could have happened to it.
I want them to realize that the people that do these things do them so that they can prevent future ones. And that's why air transportation is as safe now as it is because we have learned from our mistakes.
In his class, all aspects of the crash are examined: the weather, the crew, the plane. Nothing is left to chance. The students learn from using their own crash scene dioramas.
How people are looking out for you when you fly, and when something goes wrong, how many people are there to actually figure out what happens and prevent it from ever happening again.
And that class going on at the San Diego Aerospace Museum this week and also throughout the summer. One thing Martindale did mention, he said the crew and the passengers did a great job upon the landing, whatever happened, because there was a fire on one side of the plane, so everybody had to get out on the same side. That takes some time, and that takes an experienced crew to make that all happen. So he says, calm and be patient. That's the best thing you can do in a crash. Right before the plane lands. I'm Fred Blankenship near Lindbergh Field.
All right, Fred, thank you for that.
All right.
In Glendale, police are investigating the death of a 16-month-old girl.